Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lion's Den. This is the Weekly Roar. It's great to have you back this week in the Lion's Den. Last week, I spoke about servant leadership, but there's one particular factor that contributes to the overall success of those types of leaders. So what happens when a leader really learns how to get to know the people they're leading? Today on the Weekly Roar, I'll talk all about it. But before we get started with today's Weekly Roar, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Greg Storch. I'm the owner of Lion Enterprise, host of the Weekly Roar, and the founder of a worldwide barter coaching program called The Helping Hand. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. And as a friendly reminder, you can find all of my video resources on my website at lion-enterprise.com. Just look for the Lion's Pride Library and check them all out. Okay, everyone, let's talk about good leaders make the connection. Now, most of my weekly roars have been running between 15 and 20 minutes, but last week when I spoke about servant leadership, I almost ran 30 minutes. It's amazing what happens when you're passionate about something. I love servant leadership because I think it really is the secret to leadership success. Servant leadership is all about putting others first and focusing on the needs of others before ourselves. But how exactly does a leader do that? How do we know how to serve others? Serving others requires that we get to know them. It requires an effort that takes our basic knowledge of them as employees and forge stronger relationships on a more personal level. Yeah, that's okay to do, and I highly encourage it. Knowing your people and knowing their desires and dreams and struggles helps leaders to understand how to give them what they need. If you want to show them, you have to know them. When leaders know their people on a more personal basis, when it comes to decision making, it can change the entire playing field. It adds a whole different dynamic to consider. But when a leader does that, when a leader takes their people into consideration when making decisions, trust begins to grow. And where there's trust, there is the ability to influence. And you know what they say, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So today, I wanted to talk about taking our communication with our followers to the next level. And I'll share some real life examples of where I've put this into practice in my own leadership. I can tell you right now, it pays to know your people, and this is one sure way to get better at it. Now, before I share my story with you, I want to talk about connecting with people. Connecting with others sounds simple, but what I'm going to share today will help you understand that it isn't as easy as it sounds. It takes intentional effort. A few years ago, I read a book called Everyone Communicates, Few Connect by John C. Maxwell. There it is right here. Now, in my opinion, that book changed the game for servant leaders. Here's why. The author provided his readers with 5 principles and 5 practices that lead to connecting with others. Connecting with others is a way for leaders to take their communication skills to the next level. And in my mind, everything rises and falls on communication. and leadership. When I think about communication, I think of the typical models we all learned in basic communication classes, whether that was in school, in college, or whether that was in the workplace. You know, the model, there's a sender and a receiver, there's always a message, and then there are barriers to that message. You know how it goes. You're probably visualizing it right now as I'm talking about it. But connecting is different. It requires that we have the ability to communicate, of course. But connecting is the practice that allows us to get to know people on a deeper level. Now, as I mentioned, the book divulges the 5 principles and 5 practices to connecting. They're awesome, and they're all very true. So as I read through the book for the umpteenth time, certain principles and certain practices resonated with me. The cool thing about this is each one of these is something that you can start putting into practice right away to get better at connecting. It's like any other skill. Connecting can be learned, and we can get better and better at it the more we do it. So today I'm going to talk about the principles and practices of connecting that were developed by John Maxwell as the ones that resonated with me and why. And then I'm going to share a story about how I was doing this naturally before I ever read John's book. One of the 5 principles of connecting states that connecting is all about others. Well, that has servant leadership written all over, doesn't it? Let's talk a little bit about that principle. It's all about others. The lesson in this principle is that in order to be a successful connector, we have to learn how to make the shift from putting ourselves first to putting others first. Now, you know that I've struggled with this when I was a young leader. Leadership was all about me, and I had trouble focusing on those I was leading. Now, if you're wondering how I knew or how you can tell if this is happening to you, the next time someone speaks to you, try to have awareness while you're in that conversation and see where your mind is at. Is your mind wandering? Are you wondering when the other person is going to stop talking so you can have your turn? If you're not where you want to be in your definition of success, perhaps you may want to consider where you're placing your focus. Let me save you some trouble and just share this gold nugget right out of the gate. When we remain self-centered, we remain the root of our problems and the cause of our failures. Yeah, I said it. This whole topic on putting others first reminds me of one of my all-time favorite Zig Ziglar quotes. And I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. You can have everything you want in life as long as you're willing to help enough other people get what they want. Our success comes when we learn to take the focus off ourselves and turn it towards others. So instead of always trying to correct others, why don't we start trying to connect with them instead? Now, I'm going to be the first to tell you that putting others first isn't easy. It isn't easy for a lot of reasons. It takes maturity, and it also requires that we check our egos at the door. Some people can't do that, and those are the ones who struggle to find success. At the end of the day, if we're willing and able to shift from our own agendas and focus on others, get to understand who they are and what they dream about, then you can become a good connector and servant leader. Now, for those of us who have a natural tendency to put others first, then connecting will feel more natural and less mechanical to you. So that is really one of the first principles that caught my attention. Perhaps that's because I had a tendency to be a little selfish in my younger years. But remember, connecting requires that we make the shift from being selfish to selfless. Now, let me share with you the second principle of connecting. This one also caught my eye, and that is that connecting always requires energy. Now, I really love this one too, because I'm a high energy person and it can attract like-minded people to me. So when I see the word energy, it sparks my interest. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of this principle as well. For me, there are two rules that are associated to this principle, and both are based in energy. First, if you want to connect with others, you have to go first. And second, you have to go where they are. You can't expect them to come to you. So that first one, you have to go first. Imagine you're at a party and most of the people there you have never met or you don't know very well. If you want to be a connector, you have to go first when it comes to initiating the conversation. If you sit against the wall by yourself and watch from afar, you'll never get the chance to connect with someone else. Now, if you do exert the energy to go first, remember this: it isn't about you. It's about them. That means don't spend your time talking about yourself. You can do that by fostering a curious mindset and ask questions about them. This rule's going to come in handy when I share one of the practices of connecting with you. Whether we're speaking to just one person or an entire room full of people, if we want to connect with them, we have to expend the energy to make sure we're prepared for it, committed to it, and we come off as interesting to them. All of that requires energy. And probably the biggest reason it requires energy is because it requires us to be intentional about it. Energy doesn't mean being loud or flashy or fast. It can also mean being present and maintaining our focus on others. All of those things require energy from us. This is the principle that taught me that if I wanted to connect with others, it takes energy to apply myself and give my very best to it. That takes a lot of energy. Trust me. So those two principles are what stood out to me, and it's what I focus on when I'm trying to connect with others. So remember, connecting is always about others, and connecting always requires energy. Now, that leads me to the one practice of connecting that I want to share with you today. It's my all-time favorite, and then I'm going to share a story of my own connection with a particular employee of mine from back in 2013. This practice is something that you can start doing right away to help you become a better connector. It's super easy, and what I love most about it is that it's not just about leadership. This is something you can apply right away to positively impact your personal relationships as well. Here it is. Connectors connect on common ground. And let me tell you, it's hard to find common ground with others when you're always staring at your own feet. Now, there are plenty of things that can get in our way of finding common ground with someone. Think about it for a second. If you have a friend who you share different political views, different than your own, how are you able to maintain that friendship? Well, you find common ground with them. It's just not politics. Two of the biggest things that can really block finding common ground is when we make assumptions about other people, and especially when we assume we know how others feel and what they're thinking. And then the other thing that can get in our way is our own arrogance or our attitudes that we don't really need to know how others think and feel. Either way, if you make assumptions or have an arrogant attitude, you'll find it hard to make a connection with others. During my talks on connecting with other groups, I'll pick a person in the audience and I'll walk up to them and I'll start a conversation. It goes something like this. Hey, what's your name? Hi, John. My name's Greg. Where are you from, John? And I'll continue to keep the questions focused on the other person while taking note of their answers because I'm listening for common ground, a point of connection. And then the questions will continue. Are you married? Oh, do you have children? Oh, yeah. How many? Boy, girl, both? As soon as I hear something we have in common or that I can relate to, I latch onto it and I use that to establish a connection with them. But it goes beyond that, right? You have to remember these things about the person you're speaking with. So I'll say something like, let me introduce you to my wife, or let me introduce you to my friends over here. And when I bring them over and introduce that person, I tell a few things I just learned about them to the other person. It does a couple of things. It shows that I'm actively listening to them and that I'm genuinely interested in what they're saying. All of these things can make that connection on common ground. Charles Kettering said that there is a great deal of difference between knowing and understanding. You can know a lot about something and not really understand it. That's the best way that I can think of to describe the difference between communicating and connecting. Communicating is knowing and connecting is understanding. Common ground is a place where people can share their ideas, discuss their differences, and even find solutions together. It's where my circle intersects with your circle. And in that intersection is common ground. So remember this, the willingness to see things from others' points of view is the secret to finding common ground. And finding common ground is really the secret to connecting. So before I wrap up today, let me tell you about Mikey D. Mike Daniels was a desktop support technician on the IT contract that I managed back in Washington, D.C. Now, Mike had dreams of promoting to a higher IT position as a system administrator. He spent his own personal time after work shadowing the system administrators in order to learn and understand the position in the job. Mike was also a big family man. He coached Little League baseball in his off time, and he loved to treat those boys whenever he could to special events. Now, I had a team of about 30 technicians, and Mike was just another one in the crowd. So how was it that I knew all of these things about Mikey D? Well, I spent more time walking the floor speaking with my employees than I spent inside my office. I spoke with Mikey many times on my way out the door in the evenings. It was through connecting that I was able to learn these things about Mikey. But here's the best part. This is what I mean about focusing on others. When I had a vacancy on the system administrator team, a team of about 7 people, I shared the announcement with Mikey D and I told him to apply. Mike was interviewed along with the other candidates, and the recommendation from the manager was to hire Mike because of the effort he had put into learning the job. We promoted Mike into that position, and a year into his job, he became a system administrator. You see, having a people focus changes the decision-making process. I could have looked outward and recruited from outside the company, but I knew Mikey D was ready and qualified to do it. Now, the company I worked for had season tickets to the Nationals baseball team, and the agency I worked for was right across the street from the baseball stadium in DC. Whenever they couldn't use the season tickets, they would offer them up to the employees of the company. And typically, they would ask me to use them since we worked right across the street. Well, after Mikey had told me about the boys he was coaching and how some of them had never been to a real baseball game inside a stadium before, I grabbed those tickets and I gave them to Mikey so he could bring 3 of his boys with him to that game. Had I not known about his little league crew, I would have passed on grabbing those tickets. So there's an example of connecting with others by putting them first, listening to them, abandoning my ego, and truly hearing what he had to say. Connecting is a skill that's required if you want to be a better servant leader. It's a skill that's needed if you want to be a better spouse, friend, neighbor, or even coworker. It goes beyond simple communicating with others. It requires active listening, intentionality, and energy. Hopefully today, by sharing a couple of connecting principles with you and my favorite connecting practice, you can get started on becoming a better connector too. Put forth the effort, and I guarantee you will see your personal and professional relationships change for the better. All right, everybody, that does it for today. I want to thank you all for supporting me and joining me in the Lion's Den. If you want to keep running to the roar, then join me again next week. All you have to do is just come on back to the Lion's Den next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for supporting me and watching the Weekly Roar today. I appreciate all of you. And until we meet again next Wednesday, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.